Even all, welcome to the Pyramid Podcast, where three lads discuss all things the English football pyramid. On today's episode, we'll take a look at the EFL Cup first leg results before discussing some of the big transfer stories in the upcoming Premier League action. We're joined by Alfie House of the Southern Daily Echo, who will talk us through Pyramid Pod Cup holder Southampton's 19-game unbeaten run before we preview the rest of the EFL action. And we'll finish up with Lauro, who will talk us through Yeovil's 1-0 win versus Taunton to remain 13 points clear at the top of National League South. I'm your host, Alex Murphy, and once again, I'm joined by Tom Gallagher and Tom Lawrence. Boys, we'll start with the EFL Cup. Tomo, Middlesbrough 1, Chelsea 0. Loads of injuries for Middlesbrough, but what a win for Michael Carrick and Middlesbrough.
Yeah, and like you just said, even more impressive that they had loads of injuries going into the game. I think it was 9 or 10. And then in the space of the first 20 minutes or 25 minutes, they had two players go off injured. So you think really they were there for the taking. And to be fair, Chelsea, obviously, they were the better team, really. Cole Palmer had a hatful of chances in the first half. He probably should have scored. And then when you don't score, and like we always say, you give the underdogs a bit of a chance. And obviously, Hayden Hackney, the local boy, I think he's been at Middlesbrough since he was 10 years old. He pops up with a goal as a good work from Isaiah Jones on the wing, and they get a really good result, and it's a really impressive result. I think after about 60 minutes, they kind of sat in and basically went for the 1-0 result. And Chelsea are the type of team who they're pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? But they're not very good going forward, like as in between the boxes. They're quite good at creating chances, but not very good at finishing chances. So, and it was just a case of that, I guess, for Chelsea. But really impressive for Middlesbrough. You kind of hope for the Carabao Cup. It's 20 years since they last qualified for a final, and that was the Carabao Cup, and they won that day, and they won the trophy. So if they can get to the final on the 20-year anniversary of that win, that would be good for them. But Chelsea, Jesus Christ, it is bad from Pochettino. And do you know what? I know I'm banging on a bit here, but I've watched Pochettino quite closely over the last 4 or 5 months, and there's something he doesn't quite look or feel like the same manager he was while he was at Tottenham. It's almost like he's lost a bit of fire, and he's almost accepting of what's happening. And he's not as demanding as he used to be. But maybe that's just me looking from the outside in. And obviously, you look for things to poke holes in when they're not doing so well. But yeah, look, really impressive win for Middlesbrough.
Just quickly, can either of you tell me who Middlesbrough beat in the final when they won the Carling Cup or the Worthington Cup, whatever it was called, 20 years ago?
I just listened to that on Talk Sport this morning, but I've completely forgot.
Tottenham?
I've got Bolton in my head, but I'm actually just researching it now.
To be honest, I've just thought.
I think it is Bolton
scoring. But
it is Bolton. They won 2-1. Yeah. Talking of TalkSport though, you know, like they like to be out there with like what they say and stuff. I was listening to TalkSport on Tuesday night on my way back from Yeovil Taunton. Must have been the same night. And Dean Saunders was on, and he was like, "Yeah, bad result for Middlesbrough. 1-0's not enough." And I just thought, "Fucking hell, Dean! No wonder it didn't last long at Doncaster, and all the players don't have a lot of good things to say about." Yeah, nice guy, but Jesus Christ,
but you'll have Borough fans who will be like, "I'm not having that from Dean," ringing up and paying whatever the per minute fee is for TalkSport. Yeah. So that's their business model.
Yeah, just on as well that game, and on the winner Hayden Hackney. You know, when a championship player does well like that, you just know the next couple of days he'll be linked with moves to the Prem, and I think he's been linked with Man City, Man United, Tottenham and Chelsea since he scored that goal. And I know he's only 21 and he plays for England under 21 as well. So obviously he's very good. And I think Michael Carrick has said in an interview that they want to keep him until at least the end of the season. But it'd be interesting to see how he gets on, I suppose, as a local boy. And he's obviously done really well. Headline news, getting the winner against Chelsea.
Yeah, and then the other tie, guys, was Liverpool 2, Fulham 1. So what's quite nice is both ties are alive. It could have been a whole lot better for Fulham, though. Tomo, obviously go 1-0 up. Willian scored. Liverpool kind of missing a couple chances, but Fulham really dangerous on the counter attack. Obviously without Salah and Trent as well, a bit weaker than normal. And I mean, Bobby Cordova-Reid has got to square that Annie at 1-0, because that's 2-0 and probably a victory at Anfield and going back to Craven Cottage and bang favourites to go through then.
Yeah, I would say that game really is the story of Liverpool's season. Like they've not really hit the ground running, gone behind, and then the team have missed a couple of chances to go two ahead, and Liverpool then inevitably fight back. And I thought it was quite impressive from Liverpool in the second half, really, because they were really bad in that first half. And like you said, they should have probably been 2 or 3-0 behind, and that would have made things really interesting if Fulham could have gone back to Craven Cottage with and nicked a win at Anfield. But the difference, I suppose, in the two teams would be Fulham brought on Bobby D. Cordova-Reid, and Liverpool then bring on Darwin Núñez. And I know he's not hit the ground running, I guess, since he's joined from Benfica, but he's still a £90 million striker. And obviously he comes on, I think he got 2 assists.
Yeah, he squared it to Gakpo as well. He came on as well. He obviously a big money signing, so they've got that firepower even without Salah and Trent.
Exactly. But and it's all I would say as well. It's a bit of a story of Fulham's season, because we spoke a lot about them not having Mitrovic, and Raul Jimenez has obviously chipped in with a couple of goals lately. But if they had like a lethal player, then they would have been 2 or 3-0 up, and then you can never write off Liverpool ever, really. But obviously, if they go to Craven Cottage with a 2-1 lead instead of a 2-1 deficit, you definitely make it a 50-50 game. Now it's like 75-25.
Yeah, I think Marco Silva before the game, if you offered him only a 1-goal deficit and get it back to Craven Cottage for a one-legged tie, he might have taken it. But an hour into that game, it was just before the Bobby Reid chance to square it. There was one where he was played through and he just couldn't quite get the touch under control, and it took him out a bit wide when he looked like he was through on goal, and Liverpool looked like they were there for the counter. But to be honest, come the end, I think Marco Silva probably was just glad that Liverpool didn't go on and get a third and fourth, because obviously the second goal came fairly quickly, and you know what it can be like at Anfield. The ball sometimes just gets sucked in a bit. So, but both ties are live, which is all you can ask for over a 2-legged semi-final. So yeah, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll know who's going to be through to the final there. Boys, we'll move on and just look at some of the main transfer stories in there, and a 2-part deal here. Boys, the first part is Dragusin from Genoa going to Spurs. So Tomo, just get a bit on that deal, and I guess where you see him in that starting 11, if you do think he's going to start in 11. And then Laurie, Jed Spencer's gone the other way back to Genoa, just kind of his time at Leeds and what that means for his career going out to Serie A now.
Yeah, so I'll touch on Radu Dragusin. I'll obviously admit it right now. I've never seen him play, but I've obviously done a little bit of reading up on him. And I guess it's a good bit of business from Genoa, because they bought him in the summer for 5.5 million euros. And now he's gone to Tottenham 6 months later for 30 million euros. But he's a 21-year-old. He's usually deployed as a right back, but can play centre half. And look, he must be really highly thought of, because Bayern Munich tried to hijack the deal late doors. Napoli were in for him as well. And it was interesting because obviously Tottenham got the deal over the line, but his agent released this weird statement overnight where he was like, he basically admitted that they were shocked that they rejected Bayern and they can't believe what they've done. And even today he said that that he's already done that whole, his dream is to play for Barcelona or Real Madrid. So it feels like they've obviously he's got big ambitions as a defender to play for Tottenham for 3 or 4 years and then go on to bigger and better things. But look, it's needs must for Tottenham. Like we spoke a lot about, well, I guess having Ben Davies as a centre half cover is not really ideal, and obviously the right back, whose name escapes me right now, but he's played centre half alongside Ben Davies a couple of times. Romero's out injured. Van der Ven's coming back. So they definitely need a centre back in. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly he settles into the team if he sort of cements his place straight away.
Is that Emerson Royale's name you forgot there?
Yeah, Emerson
Yeah, I
Royale.
think it was Emerson Royale's name.
Sorry, Emerson. He's a character as well. I'm surprised at that. What did you say the price was they've paid for Dragusin?
30 million euros.
Don't you think that's weird? Like, I know you say it's good business because they only bought him for 4 or whatever, but that seems cheap now for a top level player who's going to go and probably start for Spurs.
Yeah,
Is it good business, or should they be getting 6 to 7?
I think a number of clubs probably picked up on that as well, because Bayern Munich tried to hijack the deal. And then I think a few clubs might have looked at that and thought, actually, if this guy's going to be a top level centre half, we can get him in for, what's that, 25 million sterling. Yeah, I'll have a bit of that. But Genoa probably thought, we've had him 6 months, we're making 5 times on him. Yeah, but Laura, Jed Spence going in the other direction on loan. It's not really worked out for him, has he, since that "Where Are My Manners" tweet, smoking a cigar to Neil Warnock?
No, and sometimes you can't read into everything you see on social media, but I think everyone got a certain impression from that post, didn't they? And I think it's turned out to be pretty much bang on. Conte obviously wasn't having him at Spurs, but to be fair, that was a big move for him, a jump up. He only went to Forest in the first place because Warnock didn't start him at Borough. I think he preferred Isaiah Jones or whoever at the time. Anyway, he's coming to Leeds this season. He was injured for a lot of it, but it was Daniel Farke that sent him back. He wasn't recalled. We terminated the loan at Leeds, and I think reading between the lines and seeing what people are saying over social media and stuff, I think it was training, attitude, all the sort of things that we were worried might be a slight concern when it comes to Jed Spence, who's obviously got talent, but that only gets you so far. And then obviously the sort of application and the way that you act within a football club matters. So maybe sending them abroad to pick up some experience out there in a different kind of culture and a different environment away from maybe English cities will do him good. Obviously, I'm only speculating here, but reading between the lines, it feels like he's been a little bit of a problem player in terms of his attitude in and around the clubs at the moment, and maybe getting away will be a decent move for him. But he's a good player on his day, so I expect for Genoa, that's going to be a good signing.
Yeah, and then just another piece of business involving a couple of those clubs. So Eric Dier to Bayern Munich. Must admit that wasn't on my radar before the transfer window, and I doubt on many people's. But the Bayern Munich manager has said that, buzzing to get him in, spoke about him as a centre-back who's played for England, played in the Premier League, can play 6. But are we thinking that that's going to be backup for Upamecano and Kim Min-jae and just a kind of a squad player for Bayern Munich?
Yeah, look, just quickly, a bit of breaking news on that, because I thought that was a bit weird of a career move for him, because obviously he's not playing at Spurs. And I thought, if you sign like a 4 or 5 year deal at Bayern, and it feels like you're probably not going to play, obviously he can play defensive midfielder, centre back, right back, or I think sometimes when they play 3 at the back, obviously he's perfect for that. But yeah, so it's just come out just then that he's going to sign an initial 6-month contract and with an option of another year. So I feel like it's, for all parties, it's perfect, because it's good for Bayern, because obviously they're getting a player who plays multiple positions. He's an England international, and he might be a touch too slow for Ange's style of play, but the Bundesliga, it's not as quick as the Premier League, so he might fit in perfectly. Also, another note, he's obviously Harry Kane's best mate, isn't he? So Harry Kane's obviously pushed this. So it will be good for him to help him settle. So if it means that Harry Kane's happier and scores even more goals, then that's perfect. And it's obviously good for Dier, because okay, he might not play all the games, but 6 months' time, he'll be a free agent if he doesn't play, and then he can sort of world's your oyster. And look,
maybe a Bundesliga, the Polka, the German Cup, and a Champions League winner as well.
Well, exactly, yeah, exactly that. Yeah, you're right, exactly that.
Lauro, just on Eric Dier, we've spoken obviously at length about midfields for England, centre backs for England. Do you think if he can go and get a run of games at Bayern Munich due to an injury or just starts to start in a back three or whatever that looks like, that he's got a chance to go into the Euros at all?
No, I don't think Southgate's having him. Do you?
No, no.
And it depends. What I used to, do you know what? I used to really like Eric Dier in like the midfield position for Tottenham under Pochettino, probably 5 or 6 years ago. But I think the wheels have come off a little bit of his career recently. But what I will say is because of his, like you've just touched on, his utility, he can play in lots of different positions. It's is it a small fee he's going for? Is it a fee at all?
Yeah, it's
I think
I
I
think
saw
I've
like a
seen
couple
like
of
3 or 4 million euros.
Yeah.
yeah, 3 or 4 million. I think he's a good signing for any club in the world. Do you know what I mean? You always see the big clubs bring in like players that are maybe flattered to deceive, but because they can play central midfield or central defense, and they've got experience at the top level. Eric Dier would have played Champions League. He'd have played for England in major tournaments. He's a good player to have around. And if he's best mates with Harry Kane and he's going to make him play even better, then I expect he'll start every week for Bayern Munich because Harry Kane looks like the best player that's ever played in the Bundesliga at the moment.
Yeah, and then another English player on the move to Germany as well, Dier Jadon Sancho, gone back to loan on Dortmund. Been a pretty damning Athletic article that's come out today that I know we've both read, and he's back on social media and he said he's home type thing. So yeah, it sounds like a good deal financially for United. Get some of that wage bill off. There's a fee that comes with it that's rising if they do well. But do you think Sancho is going to be playing for his Man United career there, or do you think this is a shop window to go on to sell him in the summer?
Well, I guess that all depends on Eric Ten Hag's future. I look, as a United fan, reading articles like that from the Athletic, I'll just sort of make some of the key points brief. But yeah, he turns up late all the time. The coaching staff and Eric Ten Hag about 3 or 4 months ago all agreed with him that he would turn up to training 1 hour before the rest of the squad because he was turning up for late that often. And apparently that worked for a couple of weeks, but then Sancho just went back to his old habits and started turning up late. And I think turning up late for things on a lot of occasions is probably one of the most disrespectful things you can do to your work colleagues. And so as a Manchester United fan, I don't really want to see him back at United. It's clear that he's had these issues with his attitude, I guess, throughout his whole career. He even had it at Dortmund. So, yeah, it's a difficult one. I say good riddance, to be honest. He doesn't seem like a good egg at all. But like you just said, it is a good deal for United in the sense that if he plays for Dortmund now for 6 months and starts playing just as well as he did for Dortmund last time out, then his value will increase and we'll be able to sell him for 40, 50 million in the summer.
One other point as well, sorry to keep reverting back to England, but if he's going to go play out on the left in Dortmund in a season where no one is grabbing that left wing spot for England by the bollocks, if he has a really good half season at Dortmund, do you think that he could fill that role?
Not a chance. He's a bad egg.
No way.
He would just turn up for meetings late and there's no way. If you look at when Mason Green was coming through, Southgate never picked him. And everyone was like, well, Mason Greenwood, he looks like one of the best young players ever. And it was clear that Southgate knew he was a bad egg. And I think Southgate, he values good eggs.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's big
Don't
on
we
he's
all?
big. Yeah, he's big on culture. I get that. He has been in Southgate squads. He's been at tournaments. I think he played in the quarterfinal against Ukraine, I think, if I remember rightly. But there was definitely a couple of games he played in.
He played in that quarterfinal against Ukraine, but we changed we changed quite a lot in that game. And what I would say is he went to that tournament off the back of that was before he was at United, wasn't it? He was on the back of a Dortmund season where he was good and he still wasn't getting in the side. Do you know what I mean? I don't think Southgate fancies him, never has. And I'd be very, very surprised if he ever plays for England again while Southgate's the manager.
yeah, we've got so many good players in those positions, like Grealish, Rashford, Foden, even
Gordon.
Gordon, Maddison. So
Owen.
I just can't see it.
Yeah, Jared Bowen, not to be missed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Cool. Well, that's fine then. So neither Eric Dier or Sancho are going to the Euro. Sorry to break it to you both. Tomo and Laura have ruled those both out. Boys, let's move on to the Premier League weekend action. Going to start with Newcastle City. Laura, obviously Newcastle not been in great form, but did win the derby against Sunderland in convincing fashion. But for Man City, if reports are to be believed, you're going to have De Bruyne, Haaland and Doku all back in for them. Fancy Newcastle to get back to winning ways at home, or think City will go to St James's Park and get all three?
Laura, before you answer, let me just hit you with a stat.
Yeah, good. I needed some time anyway on that.
Newcastle have only won 1 out of their last 32 league matches against Manchester City.
Yeah, I'm not asked about that, Teagout. You always come out of these like head-to-heads down the years. It's a completely different set of players under a different set of circumstances, isn't it? The last time they played at St James's Park, I think, was that 3-3 game last season.
Yeah.
Which was really good, wasn't it? And it sort of epitomised everything good about Newcastle over the last 18 months. Yeah, I mean, Newcastle, we talk time and time again about the atmosphere that they can create. They seem to get right up for the big game. So I think there'll be a match for Manchester City. I think they'll need to get their noses in front and try and hang on in that game a little bit. Because if City do have Haaland back, do have De Bruyne back, they're going to have a lot more threat up the top half of the pitch than they've had in recent weeks. And it could end up being a little bit of a mismatch, really, with the form that Newcastle were in. Okay, they beat Sunderland the other day, but in the league, they've been in no form. They need a win, but I'm not sure it's going to come against Manchester City, who I think we all think are probably going to go on now onto a bit of a run now that they've got their best players back. So I'd love to see Newcastle win because I don't want to see what we've seen in the last few seasons and Man City just run away with it. At the same time, the realist in me says that could be one of those 2-3-0 Man City wins that we all think are boring, but are very, very good and efficient.
Yeah, what I will say about Newcastle is they are definitely the club, I would say, the club that definitely needs this sort of, what would you call it, a winter break the most.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at their style of play last year, it was so like blood and guts and thunder and everything, hell for leather, 110%. And it feels like this year, with the injuries and the amount of games, they've not really been able to do it. Whereas against Sunderland, they had a whole week training to prepare. And okay, the levels of opposition are completely different. I get that. But their intensity was there again. And they've now got a week between that Sunderland game and the City game. So will their intensity be there again? And it is a massive game for them. And obviously the St. James's Park effect is a big thing. We always talk about it. So I'm only sort of playing devil's advocate here, but I actually think City will win. When you've got De Bruyne, Haaland and Doku coming back, it's difficult, isn't it, to predict anything other than a City win. But notes of positivity, I guess, for Newcastle going into it.
Presumably, Newcastle are going to have 2 weeks off after this because they're playing Saturday. Then the following Saturday's a couple of other teams that aren't playing this week. That's the whole point of the winter break, isn't it? So they're going to have 2 weeks. A worry of mine would be if Newcastle go and get spanked badly against City now, and then there's a 2-week break. Is that a bit of an opportune time for...
They're not going to sack him.
Well, Eddie Howe to just get a phone call in Dubai and be like, thanks, Eddie, but this is probably where we're going to sever ties and try and bring a big name in, like Mourinho, whose contract's up in the summer.
Mourinho being spotted at airports, this, that, and the other. I think it's best I think it would be best for Eddie Howe if he wins on Saturday, put it that way.
Christ, he's got to win against the treble winners to save his job.
I don't think you should have to. I'm just saying, if they lose 4-0 at home, and I know what Newcastle fans are like, very, very good to get the atmosphere going, but sometimes, I mean, I'm already seeing our friends that are Newcastle fans sort of saying same old shit, even though they've been given a wonderful 18 months under Eddie Howe so far. It can turn quickly in football. We know that. And to be fair, they're 9th in the league, isn't they? Which
they can drop to 11th if they can drop to 11th this game week. So
if Eddie Howe sat in the bottom half for the next 2 weeks, I'm not sure I'd want to be in. But I don't think he should be sacked. And that's not me. That's just me, fearing the worst.
the only thing I would say is that we've done that throughout this season on Eddie Howe and asked those sort of questions. And normally, come the next pod, they've picked up a really important 3 points. And so we might do the next pod and they've gone and won at home to City. So
No, no. I don't. There can't have been enough. I know what you're saying. There can't have been enough important 3 points recently for them to be ninth. They're below Man United, for God's sake. I mean, if anything, that will tell you that you're in dire straits. And the next one to go below would be Chelsea, who are absolutely all over the place. So
this is what I said I've said on previous pods and been shot down a bit, is they finished bottom of their European group. And I know they've had recent losses which have only cemented this point, but they could soon be completely out of Europe and beneath Man United and Chelsea. And if reports are to be believed, sailing very closely to profit and sustainability measures, and might have to offload one of their stars this month, be it Isak or a Bruno Guimaraes or one of their other big names, to appease some of the financial constraints as well. So not all rosy at Newcastle.
No, but I mean, the fact that they finished bottom in their UEFA Champions League group is the fact that we can even say that about Newcastle is testament to Eddie Howe and his staff. He deserves time. That's the point. But yeah, ninth in the Premier League below. I mean, I'm just looking at the table now. I can't believe West Ham are sixth. That's a conversation for another day, I guess. But yeah, it's a little bit. I actually think it's a little bit worse than it seems for Newcastle. They've been in the Champions League and had those good nights, but like you said, they are out of it now, and they need to start looking up at getting in Europe at all at the moment.
Yeah, well, no better way to silence the critics for Eddie Howe than going and beating Man City. So we'll see how that one goes. Tomo, Man United versus Tottenham. No Son, no Maddison. Van der Ven and Romero both in fitness races. Tottenham play a really high line, and Ange's philosophy is we're going to keep doing it. And one thing that United have shown is that if a team defends high, we can kind of counter-attack at pace. Why am I sat really optimistic about United's chances on Sunday against Tottenham?
Completely misplaced optimism, I guess. But look, this is a really big game. If you have a look at the table, we're 8 points behind Tottenham, who are in fifth. So if Tottenham come to Old Trafford and beat us, that's 12 points off of Tottenham, and it feels like that's probably curtains for Man United's Champions League hopes. I feel like it's curtains anyway, Laura. I know you're laughing, so I don't feel like we've got a good chance anyway. But obviously, it does feel like Man United's first 6-pointer of the season, where if we go and beat Tottenham, then it's only 5 points, and then that's only 2 games difference, and then you can get a bit of a momentum. But it's impossible to predict Man United this year. I'll tell you what, the only thing you can predict is that we'll play poorly, but whether we win or lose is another thing. But I think we'll be poor.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's curtains on the Champions League hopes. I think it's sort of full-size industrial metal shutters went down a long time ago on that. And if you end up in any kind of Europe, even the Conference League, you'd be lucky. Having said that, I don't. They are 8th, United, and they're above the likes of Newcastle. They just seem to they never seem to win. But I'm convinced they start on like 10 points or something, United, because they never seem to be quite as much trouble as someone else.
It's because we win. It's because we win games that we're terrible in. So it feels like it's a disaster when we've just like snuck a 2-1 or we beat Fulham 1-0 and we were absolutely awful. Bruno scored in the last minute. Obviously, the Brentford game, we were 2-0 down and then McTominay happened. So even though we tend to play really badly most weeks, we do scratch around and get a couple of wins when we don't deserve them.
Which is actually a good trait. Probably the one positive.
Exactly. Right. Clip this up. Man United will finish top 4 this season in the Premier League. We've got Luke Shaw coming back. We got Casemiro coming back. We got Lisandro Martinez coming back. We got Mason Mount coming back in. All of our players are coming back from injury. We're obviously a few points off it at the minute, but Villa's starting to drop pace. There's a clip for you.
Yeah, Man and United, also Murph, just quickly, we've got the Sir Jim Ratcliffe effect happening because he's going to watch it at Old Trafford on Sunday, so we'll get the new owner bounce. So actually, we could win the lot.
So that Dave Brailsford's all about marginal gains, so he'll be writing 1% all round Carrington to make everyone try a bit harder. So yeah. I don't think it's as full blown second half of the season we're going on a title charge, but top four 100%.
Yeah, if Marcus
me
Rashford is on Dave Brailsford's brand new mattresses that he's going to bring in, and he gets a good night's sleep finally, then all of a sudden you see Rashford's of last season.
Let me just hold you to account there, Murph. You have been quoted off air this week also as saying that Tottenham are going to win the league, if I'm not mistaken. So you've got Tottenham winning the league, you've got Man United in the top four. There's only a certain amount of spaces in that top four. Who's missing out?
Man City second, Liverpool third. Man United get it on the final day of the season because Arsenal have missed out and Arteta sacked in the summer.
And Aston Villa, I'm assuming, are just going to plummet out the sky.
Yeah, starting with Everton away, which we're going to move on to next. So
you're going to just to confirm, you're going to claw back 11-point deficit on Aston Villa.
Yeah,
and 9-point deficit on Arsenal. And are you sticking with Tottenham winning the league?
Them or City. I just thought Tottenham at 33-1 with Maddison, Van der Ven, Romero, the new signing, Werner, Son to come back from the Asia Cup. With the amount of points that they're only behind, I think it's 4 points off top with the trouble they've had. I think 33-1 was far too big at odds, so I had a score on it.
Of the few listeners that we do have listening to this podcast, we have now lost them all.
Yeah, well, I did say when we started this podcast, I'm going to use it to ensure that what you say is held.
Yeah, people are held to account.
And you'll get the credit. You'll get the credit if you're right on the very rare occasion that happens, but you also will be held to account if you just throw mud at the wall and seeing what sticks, because I won't stand for that. So let's wait and see. Clip that up, as you said, and then we'll have a look at the top four at the end of the season. And just to confirm, Murph has got Tottenham winning the league and Manchester United pipping Arsenal and Villa for fourth.
Everton versus Villa. Villa's form has been slipping recently. They go to Goodison Park, where I think Everton have been fairly good this season. Tomo, come to you first there. My personal opinion is that Everton will pick up all three at home to Villa, but what's your views on that game?
Well, Everton have obviously lost 3 in a row in the league. I know we spoke about that in the last podcast, and a couple of those games are against high-level opposition, so they can be expected, to be fair. So this is probably it is a big game for Everton, because Luton play Burnley on Friday, and if they win, they're Everton in the relegation zone, and all of a sudden, then that game becomes a little bit more riding on it, I guess. It's a difficult one to call. Villa aren't the best away from home. Yeah, I can see where you're going with this. I'm gonna tip the Toffees to win. Dominic Calvert-Lewin's appeal was successful, so he'll be available, which is obviously a massive boost. They'll have Beto coming off the bench, which is a massive boost. So yeah, look, I'm going with my Man United hat here and hoping that Everton do the job.
And now we've definitely lost all followers because our host has just told everyone that Villa haven't been in any sort of form. They've lost one game in 2.5 months, which was against Man United, which they were 2-0 up in, and they sit second in the league, the highest they've been in the Premier League probably ever. And for me, they will go and beat Everton quite comfortably. So let me just put that out there.
My point with that is that they scraped past Burnley, didn't they? Last minute Dougie Luiz penalty. They obviously threw it away at Old Trafford against Man United, which can happen, but thought they were really naive with their tactics there. Before that, they drew 1-1 with Sheffield United. Again, I think they were reliant on a 90+7 minute goal in that one. So they got past Brentford there before that. And yeah, look, before that, they had the Arsenal and the City wins, but I don't think that they're in as great a form as what they have been. And I do think that going to Goodison Park is going to be a really tough game for them.
Well, yeah, they did win 14 home games in a row before. It was impossible to always keep that form up. Everton should be a tough game for them, but I do think sometimes it's levels. We'll come back to this and have a look. My prediction is a Villa win, 2-0.
Just a question, boys, as well. I think I know the answer to this, but we spoke at length about the FA Cup. I guess Everton in midweek will have a FA Cup replay to go round to the fourth round. Do you think that Sean Dyche would value 3 points over Villa over getting through to the next round of the FA Cup, or do you think that he thinks that Everton will have plenty enough to stay up and would rather go through in the cup if he had to choose?
If he had to choose, he'd pick the win against Villa, 100%.
Yeah, the points for sure.
Tomo, you just touched on Burnley versus Luton there. Obviously, if Luton win, they can go out of the relegation. If Villa do go and get something against Everton, which I must admit, I've apologised a few times now to Luton, but I really didn't see them being in such a strong position from where I thought they'd be. I didn't think they'd be on any points at all. 4 points behind them at Burnley. We spoke about must-win games for Company and whether his job's becoming a bit under threat. And Laura, I think you touched on that the games that he needed to win were your Sheffield United, your Lutons, and having Luton at home, that's one that they've got to win, surely.
Yeah. There's no more room for error now, is there? At that end of the table, we're coming into the business end of the season. Luton at home on paper should be the most winnable game of the season. And although Burnley have been pretty terrible this year, they are still only 5 points off safety, thanks to Everton's point deduction. And there's a couple of teams in a little bit of trouble. So at least one of those teams in the bottom three have got a good chance if they go on a run of staying up. It can still be Burnley. They shouldn't have a chance by this stage. 11 points is nowhere near good enough. But like you say, if they are to get out of trouble, it has to start with 3 points at home. They've had half the season now in the Premier League to get used to it. They've picked up very little, and it needs to turn around very quickly. What I will say is a couple of their players, I think, have shown signs of playing very well recently and affecting games. That Odebert, who I don't think I've ever heard of before, seems to have sprung up and is causing problems everywhere. And they're scoring a few more goals now. So I actually expect them to beat Luton on Friday night. And listen, for the Claret's sake, let's hope it's the catalyst for them to go on and string a run of results together. But yes, they are going to need it soon, because after Christmas, time goes very quickly and the season will soon run away with you, and you'll be back in the Championship if you don't start winning games.
Yeah, Burnley's biggest thing this season has been their home form. They've lost 9 out of 10 games at home, which is shocking, really. And this time last year in the Championship, Burnley were 17 points ahead of Luton. And now Luton are 4 points ahead of them. But that said, I do expect Vincent Kompany's men to get over the line in this game. I think Luton drew to Bolton, didn't they, in the FA Cup? So they've got a FA Cup replay coming as well. I think they've got one or two, Luton. I think one of the two of their wingers have gone to AFCON, which is obviously, for a club of Luton's size and a squad of their size, obviously a bigger hit when you lose your players. And like Laura says, I think Burnley, they have got a couple of good... Lyle Foster's back. He was out for a little bit with some mental health issues, and he's back, and he's really, really important to them, because every time he's played, he seems like a really good number 9, and obviously he's pitched in with a couple of goals. So it's a big game, to be fair, massive game. You feel like if Luton win that game, I know it's so early on in the season, but you go to your biggest relegation rivals, you go to their home ground, Turf Moor, on a Friday night and pick up 3 points to create a 7-point gap. That'd be massive for Luton. So yeah, look, interesting.
They'll then have to focus then, won't they, on pulling Everton, a Brentford, a Palace, a Forest down into the kind of mire with them if we're cutting off Burnley and Sheffield United at that point.
Yeah, but Luton have got a game in hand on the teams below them and Everton, and then Forest and Palace a little bit further on. So if they can come out of this weekend with a win against Burnley, they will leapfrog Everton, and Everton will have to beat Aston Villa to keep ahead of them, and Luton will still have a game in hand. So Luton are actually in a half-decent position for Luton, because everyone thought they would finish 20th this season pretty much, and they could be out of the relegation zone with a game in hand by the end of this weekend.
Yeah, great job Rob Edge is doing. I think they're also got the catalyst of the Tom Lockyer incident as well, which is hopefully going to spur them forward as well. One other Premier League game, guys, West London derby, Chelsea versus Fulham, both kind of languishing in mid-table at the minute, but both be looking for an important 3 points. Right, guys, delighted to have Alfie House join us now. Alfie's a senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo. So obviously Saints have been holding the Pyramid Pod Cup now for 14 games, but on a overall 19-game unbeaten run. So we thought best to get someone in who knew the club inside out to tell us a bit more. So Alfie, welcome to the pod, mate. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your role and how you got into reporting on Saints?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I'm from Somerset myself, but I moved to Southampton for university about 5 or 6 years ago, and then ended up covering Saints since 2021. So I go home and away every game. Go to pre-season in Turkey this summer. Talk to the owners, talk to the man, stuff like that. But yeah, did sports journalism at uni, and sort of just applied for a random job and got it. So I was a bit lucky, really. But it's a great gig.
Good stuff. And I guess last year then had the heartbreak of covering the whole Premier League season.
Yeah, I mean, when I first joined, I think the direction that the club was looking to go was Europa League or Conference League. And the first 6 months were brilliant. They scored loads of goals. Armando Broja on loan, Tio Livramento signed, absolute masterclass. But the second season, last season, was an absolute disaster from the start. I think the management, Raul Passanot had been there for 4 or 5 years, and that's such a long time in football. I think things were a little bit tired. The investment was poor. They sold their best defensive midfielder, Ori May, on pretty much on deadline day, didn't replace him. And ended up with Ainsley Maitland-Niles as the only sort of backup in that position. So they left themselves completely hamstrung. And they took out an 80 million quid loan about 5 years ago. So they started paying back now. And it's all just sort of caught up with them at once. And two really bad managerial appointments, one worse than the other, and in succession as well. To get one worse after Nathan Jones was really impressive work, and ended up them getting them relegated. So things are looking a lot better this season, though.
Yeah, mate. And so what we say sometimes on the pod, or we've mentioned it a couple of times, especially with Leicester and Southampton, is that sometimes getting relegated, it's a really good opportunity to almost reset as a club and go again. And obviously Southampton have done that in the summer by picking Russell Martin. And I just wanted to ask, first of all, what was your initial thoughts of the appointment, and what were your expectations going into the season with him as your manager?
Yeah, well, I spoke to the ownership in May, before anything was sort of appointed, and they said that the clear goal was to win the championship. So the first expectation was set out that they had to come in and win the league, at least finish second. In the championship, to be fair, second and first, there's no differences there. No one really cares about the title. It's just about getting back up. Russell Martin was a surprising name, I suppose. It was obvious because the club wanted to appoint somebody who, his possession-based football. And I think Saints this season, they've got the highest possession, the most passes completed, the best pass accuracy, all the things that I'm sure Russell Martin dreams about at night. But I think what they've done really well is they picked a bloke who's a fantastic chap. First and foremost, somebody who cares about the people at the club, somebody who puts the players first, but then doesn't just discount his staff and the guys like us, the media who come in, and all the people who work in the canteen and things like that. There's a real unity from everybody. So I think they've done well with that regard. But I thought, I felt initially it wasn't the most ambitious appointment in the world. It was a championship manager who finished mid-table in 4 seasons with MK Dons and with Swansea. But as it happens, it's not all about, I suppose, winning games. I suppose you can't win with a hamstrung budget. They've now given him that budget, although they've still got financial fair play problems. He's got players that are good enough to compete in the championship, and we're seeing the results.
Just following on from that, Alfie, I thought at the start of the season with Russell Martin, you mentioned there, he's got a very good reputation of his sort of possession-based football. He hasn't actually achieved a promotion yet with MK Dons or obviously Swansea. Southampton was his biggest job so far to date. And I thought at the start of the season it would be a good appointment, but I thought he'd have to ride out some pressure at some point because he's got such an extreme philosophy. It would take time to implement and get results off the back of it. So although I don't think you had a massive period of games where results weren't going your way, there was a little start of the season problem where I think the Leicester game you conceded quite a few goals, and there was a little run after that before the Leeds game where things obviously turned around and you haven't lost since. Was there a lot of pressure on Russell Martin during that period around the club, within the fans, and maybe with the board, if you're talking with those kinds of people? Or was he always going to be given sort of 6 months or longer to prolong, to have a proper go at promotion with Southampton?
There's definitely 2 separate answers to that one, because in the boardroom and at the club, the answer is definitely not. There was no real pressure. I mean, obviously the expectation was to improve because they've got the 3rd biggest budget in the league, and they were 15th in the division after those 4 defeats. But I spoke to actually Phil Parsons 2 days before, that's the CEO at the club, Phil Parsons, 2 days before the Leeds game, and he said to me then categorically that no, there's no reason to panic right now, and he was absolutely spot on. However, with the fans, because you're absolutely bang on about the sort of extreme style of play, he gets labelled as tippy tappy and stuff. It's passing for passing's sake of it, and they have these games sometimes where they have 81% possession, but they have 4 shots on target, something like that, and people think, well, what's the point of having the ball if you're not shooting? So even after they'd gone 5 or 6, 7 games unbeaten, when they drew 1-1 with somebody like Coventry, for example, you do still have that section of support that's like, we're not going anywhere with this manager. But now that it's been 18 league games and they're like 2 games off the club record since 1920. I think that people are completely unified now, but there definitely has been those patches.
Yeah, I think there's always a section of the fans, isn't there, at any club that are never going to be happy. I mean, I'm a Yeovil fan. We're top of the league by 13 points at the moment. You still get people that aren't happy with Mark Cooper, the manager, and the way he plays. That's always a part and parcel of it. But what about the recruitment? Because obviously, coming down from the Championship, there's always a bit of a turnover of players. You lost the likes of Livramento, Lavia, Ward-Prowse, even Nathan Teller, who had a good season at Burnley last season. I thought he might be utilised by Southampton, but he's gone to Germany. Income, Ross Stewart, who's been injured, but Ryan Manning's followed the manager over. Taylor Harwood-Bellis, who obviously got promoted last season. Flynn Downs in the other direction from Ward-Prowse. How have those players settled in, and who stood out from the summer recruitment? And has it been good overall? I guess it has been if you've been on such a long unbeaten run.
Yeah, I think like people were obviously gutted to lose Ward-Prowse, especially having come from the academy, play for England, one free kick away from David Beckham's Premier League record, and Saints just didn't give him the chances to get that last season at all, really. And I think, Tomo, you may have said at the start of the podcast, it gives you that chance to sort of reset. And people like Flynn Downs, Taylor Harwood-Bellis, they're probably not as good players as the people that have gone out, but they're really good for the Championship. And Flynn Downs has been exceptional. And I think Taylor Harwood-Bellis, I mean, if Taylor Harwood-Bellis doesn't play for a Premier League team next season, then I'll be absolutely baffled. Saints have an obligation to buy him for 20 million quid if they go up. But if they don't go up, there's no doubt that somebody will be buying him. So they're probably the 2 standouts. And yeah, the Ross Stewart one is... The Ross Stewart one's a cursed tale because Saints have been trying to buy a striker for about 6 transfer windows now. They nearly signed Cody Gakpo and lost him on deadline day. They nearly signed Gonzalo Ramos, Nicholas Jackson, people that are playing for massive clubs now, and never got him over the line. They finally get their man, Ross Stewart, and he comes back in November and gets injured in his second game, and now he's out for the rest of the season. So, you know, you can't really account for that. But I think supporters were a little bit frustrated because maybe they felt it was a risk. He was already injured when they signed him, things like that. So that one's maybe a little bit dodgy.
Yeah, well, a lot less Drogba when he is back and firing will be a good signing for you because he's good, Ross Stewart. But one player that has been firing for you this season, Adam Armstrong at Southampton. I wanted to ask you actually, because we talk on this pod quite a lot about a calibre of player that sort of falls into no man's land. And what I mean by that is some players, particularly strikers, I find that can be too good for the Championship and very, very prolific, but struggle when they make the step up to the Premier League. And maybe not so much recently, but within the last 5-10 years, Dwight Gale, for instance, epitomises that. Yeah. Always scored back balls at West Brom, for instance, maybe with Newcastle, but never really got going up to the Premier League. I look at Adam Armstrong and I think this season, a goal every other game. He's the highest assist maker in the Championship as well, which is a really underrated asset for him, certainly from a neutral's point of view. And I just wonder, from someone's perspective that watches him every week, do you think that's a fair analysis, that he's too good for the Championship and not good for the Prem, or do you think he's got it in him to go on and become consistent goal scorer at the top level as well?
Well, based on the statistics, I mean, he's got 50 goals and assists combined his last 2 Championship seasons, whereas he got 4 goals, I think, in the Premier League in 2 seasons. I was there on his debut at Goodison Park when he scored a great volley, I think, 30 minutes into the game. And the Saints fans were chanting, "Who the fuck is Danny Ings?" And apologies if you need to sort of bleep that. But we're thinking, here he is. He's the replacement. We spent half the money of Danny Ings, and we've got the man. And it just didn't work out. He ended up playing basically as a left wing back by the end of the Premier League era. I spoke to Russell Martin about this, and I asked him that exact question, basically. Do you think he can cut it? And the answer that he gives is that he's in a system now which suits him more. But, I mean, obviously people are still going to be skeptical, aren't they? Because the numbers are so wildly different. Adam Armstrong's a lovely bloke, but he doesn't strike me as the most confident fella. So maybe there's an element of that as well. And I'm sure that in the Championship, you probably get about 10 times as much time as you do in the box. Like against Leeds, for example, he scored that brace. I'm pretty sure that in the Premier League, they'd have been stopped. 2 fantastic goals.
And then you obviously spoke about Adam Armstrong there. Another person I've seen in the news, and I've seen you've even tweeted about it, Alfie, about not quite sure which way to go with it. Che Adams, sort of linked with potentially moving back up to the Premier League. Is there like a case that you should bank some money on him now? Do you think that he's someone who's important to keep in case there's an injury to Armstrong to like kind of push on with the promotion push? What's your kind of thoughts around that one?
My personal opinion is that he might also fall into that no man's category, really. He's clearly too good for the Championship, but even though he's only scored 6 goals this season, he hasn't actually played that many minutes. He's got more goals per minute than Adam Armstrong. He does have a massive impact, but he's not. You know, they offered him a contract in August. He hasn't signed it. His agent, in my opinion, is always putting stuff into the press and stuff like that. It always seems like it's his name that's linked to Everton, linked to Wolves, linked to Fulham. And nothing ever happens. So I think probably an amicable long-term split at the end of the season would be my choice. There's no point selling him now because who are you going to get in the Championship for £6 million that's going to improve your team like Che Adams does when he's actually firing? And he's a lovely lad as well. He's a really nice guy. Maybe someone like Celtic or Rangers will offer him a pre-contract and sort of give him some airtime in Scotland as well.
Yeah, indeed. I just want to quickly, but we'll come on to speak about kind of the January transfer window expectations, hopes the rest of the season. But just want to drill down into this unbeaten run now. So obviously we started the cup 14 games ago, and as I kind of spoke to you about outside the pod, we were hoping it would sort of jump about and we could do a bit of a deep dive on each of the teams that held it. We've got to the state now where we're needing Walsall to try and win in the FA Cup just for it to change hands. But just a little bit on that 19 game unbeaten run, just where the kind of turning point was for Southampton for that. And we've obviously spoke about Adam Armstrong, Taylor Harlow-Bellis, but any other kind of standout players that have driven you forward on that run?
Yeah, I would credit Jan Bednarek with that as well. Jan Bednarek was somebody who left to go on loan to Aston Villa about 18 months ago. And in his interview with Aston Villa, he said, I'm really happy to be playing for a bigger club. And everyone was like, well, you're never going to play a game for Saints again, obviously. But he came back last January and he's been exceptional ever since, to be fair. So they're on 18 games unbeaten now in the league, 19 more competitions. I think the longest ever run they've been on is 24 in the league, but that was in like 1896, 97 when they were still called Southampton St Mary's. And the longest run since 1920 when they joined the Football League is in reach now. If they don't lose on Saturday, they will level that run. They've limped over lines sometimes. Like, let's be honest, they have thumped Swansea sort of 4 or 5-0, Blackburn 4 or 5-0. They've beaten teams, but they've also limped over line. They've scored 95th minute winners at Hull, 95th minute winner at Millwall, 95th minute equaliser somewhere else. I can't remember off the top of my head. So they've not always been the most stylish in the way they've done it. But that's what winning teams do, right? They get over the line. And Gavin Bazunu as well. Gavin Bazunu was somebody who I'm sure you saw statistics last season. He was the worst keeper in Europe, and like let goals into his left so many times, fumble passes. But this season, the way Russell Martin's playing, he's so good with his feet from being at Man City since the age of like 14, wherever it was, that he's made a real difference.
Yeah.
Looking at the Championship as a whole, Alfie, just quickly, because I'm a Leeds fan, and obviously we're in direct competition with Southampton this season, hoping to go up. And there's a lot of good teams in the Championship, and obviously, like in any league, it's the consistent ones that go up. But there's a lot of teams that play brilliantly against Leeds, and then I look at the table and they're down the wrong end of it. I mean, Preston, for example, are in 14th at the moment, but they played us off the park the other day. Who's been the best team that you've seen this season and impressed you the most covering Southampton as an opposition?
So that's a really good question, actually. It wouldn't be Leeds, unfortunately. Leeds were terrible at St Mary's. Sorry to say, they really were poor. It would have to be Leicester, right? Because they beat Saints 4-1. But Ipswich Town, I would give credit to as well. I know they've had a bit of a blip now. They've got 4 or 5 games they haven't won. But the way they set up at St Mary's was very clear. It wasn't 10 men behind the ball, but it was pragmatic. It was obvious what they were trying to do. They capitalised on one mistake, had no chance of the rest of the game, but they were comfortable. They played out the last 25, 30 minutes with no questions at all. And I thought that they're going to be up there without a doubt. And I think they will win there, right? So it'll be Saints, Leicester, Leeds and Ipswich will be the top 4. It's just the order in which they finish. And right now, obviously, I think it'll be Leicester, Saints, Leeds, then Ipswich.
Yeah, so just on from that, actually, because obviously covering Southampton on this run, the buzz around the place must be really positive at the minute. And obviously with Ipswich stumbling a little bit lately, it does feel like Southampton will be that second team at the end of the season. And so it does seem like a silly question to ask you what your expectations for Southampton are for the rest of the season, because I assume you'll answer with, well, promotion or nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they get promoted via the playoffs, I think nobody's complaining. That's the best way to do it, obviously, but you can never guarantee it. The expectation's there because Leeds, Leicester, and Saints have the biggest budgets in the league by a mile, obviously, having come down last season. So the fact Ipswich are even up there within contention is a real credit to Kieran McKenna and unfortunately, Bristol City's arch nemesis, Mark Ashton, who did a terrible job at City as their head of recruitment or director of football, whatever it was. And he's gone to Ipswich and he's pulled an absolute blinder, so fair play to him. But I mean, Russell Martin's been very clear that they need to get promoted. The problem is that we're doing this balancing act now in January where they've got a little bit of money to spend, but any money they do spend has to be recouped if they don't go up in the summer. So you're going to end up in a situation where people like Carl Walker-Peters and stuff are going to definitely leave if you risk gambling it. So, I mean, I don't know what you guys would do, but as a director of football, how much do you sort of stick your neck on the line and say, let's bring in a £5-10 million player, try and push us over the line, knowing that's going to cost you in the summer if you don't get it done?
Well,
I guess there's.
let me just jump in now quickly. The thing is, it's hard to justify as a Southampton director of football to spend that money when you're on such a good run.
That's true.
Because you're playing so well and it feels like everything's clicking, everything's going in the right direction. And to be honest, obviously when you're on these runs, you don't really see the hiccups coming. You don't really see the blips coming. They will eventually happen, but it does feel like Southampton are inevitably going to be that second team. Like you say, with the strength of the players, Adam Armstrong, Kyle Walker-Peters, like he goes under the radar a little bit, but he's absolutely class for that level, isn't he? So, look, I can't see Southampton not going up at the minute, but that's only because they're on such a good run. And to be honest, it does feel like, I know I'm being selfish here, but it feels like they know about the Pyramid Pod Cup and they're playing out of their skins for it.
They probably are.
That's what
yeah. Most coveted prize in football right now, I've heard.
I would say so.
Yeah, but I think the other thing is that like this club has been through so much torment for a couple of years, and I think it took like fans a lot of time to sort of switch their heads back around and get back into that good mood. And now that that's there, you don't want to lose it. But the issue they have is when teams set up like 10 men against the ball. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys saw the Norwich game on New Year's Day or saw anything about it, but I think Chris Sutton, who's obviously involved in Norwich, even wrote an article about it. He labelled it a disgrace the way that David Wagner's team set up at home, because it was 10 men behind the ball for 75 minutes. And it was the most negative stuff I've ever seen. But they got a 1-1 draw. They got the result they came for, and Saints do have a bit of a weakness when it comes to breaking down teams like that. So, if I was Danny Roll on Saturday, I would 100% be coming to St Mary's, sacrificing whatever pride it is I have in my system, and putting 10 men behind the ball and trying to get a result.
Yeah, and I think that's often the Achilles heel of possession-based managers. There's possession for possession's sake, and then there's possession that actually results in goals and chances and winning football matches. But what I would say is Leicester and Ipswich this year, I know Ipswich have faltered in the last few games, but they've gone off at such a pace that I think in most other championship seasons, Southampton and Leeds would probably be first and second now. And I don't quite share the same vision that Southampton are definitely wrapping up second place now. I think Leeds will come back into it, and I think it'll actually be very close come the end of the season. But I think fair play to Russell Martin because, like I said, based on most other metrics of championship seasons, he'd probably guided Saints to the top of the league by now, and that's not an easy feat. When Michael Duff was at Swansea at the start of the season, who's obviously gone now, he said the hardest thing for him was undoing that kind of extreme philosophy. So Russell Martin implementing that on Southampton, getting the unbeaten run that he's been on is really, really good. And I'm just looking forward to the next few games for Southampton. You've got Sheffield Wednesday at home, I think, next, and then it's away at Swansea. And Russell Martin goes back to the Liberty Stadium, who are now under Luke Williams' managerial prowess, who's just come in from Notts County. I just wonder if that's the day that the Pyramid Pod Cup finally changes hands.
Well, if it is, that'll be the day that it would have been the new record, the new Football League record for Saints, unbeaten. So, that would be poetic, I think. And Luke Williams, but I think he played for Russell Martin at either MK Dons or with him at Walsall or something like that as well. He's a scholar of very much the same style of football, so that would make complete sense.
We've obviously just touched on, Alfie, about how kind of the steer from the board at the start of the season was kind of promotion or nothing, or going for the title. But in a season where you've got Leicester, and Laura's just touched on there that any other season they'd probably be top, but in a season where you got Maresca at Leicester, you got Daniel Farke at Leeds, probably told he needs to get promoted. You've now got Kieran McKenna, who's fired Ipswich up there, Russell Martin at Southampton. If Saints were not to go up, but there's this clear philosophy and path with Russell Martin, do you think they'd stick by him past the summer?
Yeah, obviously, I don't know, but I do think they would. But just because of everything that we've seen, like on the pitch is fantastic, off the pitch is even better. I don't think they would be willing to rip up what he's done at Staplewood training ground and just start again, because everybody is on the same wavelength now. There's total alignment. The director of football is basically everyone at Saints is brand new. They chuck the old board in the bin, and they've got new people. They've got a new CEO, Phil Parsons, new director of football, Jason Wilcox from Man City, who plays the Russell Martin way. Russell Martin plays the Man City way. He tries to. That's what it is. So there is complete alignment there, and they probably will look at that and think, well, there's nobody better right now who can actually do that. So even if they finish fourth and lose in the playoff final or something like that, I don't think it'll be a case of panicking. There will be some changes at the club because they'll lose players like Kyle Walker-Peters, who, I was being a bit harsh on Perry Ng earlier because I joked, but I said that even Perry Ng would have Kyle Walker-Peters in his team this season. I couldn't believe that Sky Sports didn't have him in there. But they will lose guys like that if they don't go up this season.
Yeah, indeed. And then just finally, just looking ahead to the weekend. So we spoke off air about playing Sheffield Wednesday. Obviously, Danny Roll in there, a bit of history with the club. But Laura watched them against Hull recently and was really, really impressed with Sheffield Wednesday, considering they did look down and out, didn't they, sort of at the start of December time. That now looks a slightly harder fixture than maybe what it was a month ago.
I think I'm sure every team thinks this, but it seems like every team Saints player all of a sudden in a run of form. But yeah, I mean, I've been really impressed by what they've done because we obviously went to Hillsborough on the opening day of the season and they only won 2-1, got over the line with a late winner. But the last 10 minutes of the game, they totally played them off the park. And Xisco Munez's side, they made no real attempt to sort of come out and press Southampton when they were playing. But what I've seen from Danny Rowe is that they will probably be aggressive. They will be up for it. And I think they've got more points than any team in the Championship other than Leicester and Saints since the start of December when they were in the bottom three. I mean, that is a remarkable run. I was speaking to a Sheffield Wednesday fan on our podcast about a week ago, and he was he's resigned to relegation about 2 weeks ago, and right now he thinks there's absolutely no chance they'll be in the bottom three. So fair play to him. He's obviously done a good bit of work there.
Yeah, unbelievable for them. And just finally, if you can just make a promise to us that if Southampton go on to win the Premier League Cup, you'll get us in to present it to Russell Martin and the boys, because if they have, they definitely would have been promoted to the Prem, and I think it'll be a toss-up, as you say, between promotion medal and Premier League Cup. But
have you got a physical trophy?
Well, it's in the works, Alfie. It'll be major.
I can 100% do that. Yeah, I'll tell Russell about it this weekend.
That would be great if you could. Yeah. But mate, thank you so much for coming on. First guest of the pod, actually. So yeah, great to have you on. And if Saints do go on to get promoted, we'll have you back in to speak about the upcoming Premier League season. But cheers for coming.
Nice one. Cheers, guys. Appreciate that.
Thanks, mate.
Right, we've just heard from Alfie there. Obviously, Southampton have got Sheffield Wednesday this weekend, but we'll move on to the rest of the EFL action. Starting at 12:30 on Saturday, there's Coventry versus Leicester, which is 8th versus first place. But 3rd versus 2nd in the form table. I didn't realise they were quite doing as well as they were, Lauro, but Mark Robins obviously got Coventry going a bit.
Every single year he seems to do that. They seem to be like in the relegation zone till about October, and then all of a sudden, I mean, we know that they got to the playoff final and got to penalties against Luton last season, and now they're 3 points behind Sunderland in the Championship. He's a wonderfully good Championship manager, Mark Robins. I don't know how he's still at Coventry. Although Coventry are a big club, to be fair, you feel like there's sort of bigger teams in and around that could do with a Mark Robins to try and guide them forward towards the Premier League. So it'd be a tough game. The problem is Leicester are playing with complete freedom now. There's no pressure on their shoulders like there would have been at the start of the season to be at the top of the table. They can afford to lose like 5 games in a row and they'll still be top probably. So it's a dangerous beast, isn't it? A free-flowing Leicester with very little to care about. And I don't really see Coventry getting anything out of that game. But again, we talk about teams in the Premier League needing to start winning to stay up. Leicester are going to have to start losing to stay down. So hopefully that can happen at the Rico.
Yeah, I don't know if you boys heard, actually, Coventry's owner was on TalkSport a couple of days ago, Doug King, and he spoke about the turnover of players in the summer, obviously, after that heartbreak of the playoff final loss. And he basically said it's taken the manager and the club quite a long time, 3 or 4 months, just to get used to that big turnover of players. Now the players have settled and they've got a good team again. Obviously, they're on, like you just said, Murph, they're on a really good run of form. So it's difficult to predict Saturday 12:30 games, but so I wouldn't rule out Coventry altogether, but just a sign of how strong English football is and how strong Leicester are. They've been linked this week with a Inter Milan midfielder in Stefano Sensi. So, okay, he's a squad player and he's not playing that often, but Inter are top of the Serie A and Leicester are about to go and get one of their midfielders.
I saw a couple of Championship fans saying that this is starting to make the Championship a bit like difficult for teams who haven't been up before to go up because of the parachute payment system, allowing the likes of Leicester to bring in a £20 million midfielder from Inter Milan to help what already looks like a foregone conclusion of going up automatically.
Yeah, but Luton went up last season. There's no excuse. If you get enough, you get up. And just good point, Tomo. turnover of players at Coventry. In the summer, they lost arguably the two best players in the whole of the Championship last season in Victor Gyökeres, who went to Sporting Lisbon, and Gus Hamer, who went to Sheffield United. So even better job from Mark Robbins to lose them two and still be in and amongst it with a team that probably hasn't got the funding that a lot of the other teams have. Fantastic.
That Victor Gyökeres, I don't really know how to pronounce his last name, but he's gone on to Sporting and scored a hatful of goals, and he's been linked with like 50, 60 million pound moves to Chelsea. So, and he was playing at Coventry last year and obviously scored a hatful of goals as well. But to lose that type of player, I think they brought in the Everton striker, didn't they?
Elliot Sims.
Yeah. And look, there's levels, isn't there, between that?
Yeah, I mean, that was quite a lot of money. So I think like 6 or 7 million they paid for him. They also bought in a striker called Haji Wright. If you watch Coventry, he's a really, really good player to watch. Real live wire, entertaining player. But Gyökeres, I think he's got a good agent. I think he knew a couple of moves to get a couple of percent off the deals. Do you know what I mean? Because he was clearly a Premier League player, Gyökeres, in the Championship. Couple of seasons or a season in Sporting Lisbon, and then obviously they won't be able to fend off European top boys or even any Premier League club if they come in for him. So I'd like to see him back in the Prem. He's a really good striker, Gyökeres.
Yeah, I saw United linked with him as well as Chelsea, and you're probably right. You have that at Dortmund a bit, don't you? With Jude Bellingham.
United linked with?
Well, United linked with every striker in the world now, haven't we? We spoke, didn't we, Tomo, earlier in an early pod that United wouldn't be signing another top level striker or a premium price striker when we've spent that on Højlund, but looks like we're going to have to go back to the well in the summer. So, but yeah, I have seen him linked, and it follows that kind of Dortmund setup where Bellingham, Haaland, etc. go and almost use it as a bit of a stopgap because the agents can get them a move, and then it's like in a couple of years' time we'll get you another move, and then we'll, probably for Haaland the end goals to end up at like Real Madrid or a club like that. So that's the 12:30 game, Coventry Leicester. The 5:30 game, if you're not watching the Newcastle City game, a equally important game for the Championship, Ipswich versus Sunderland. Tomo, 2nd versus 6th. Obviously, Sunderland lost the derby. Ipswich beat Wimbledon in the FA Cup, but they haven't won in 5 in the league. And we've spoken earlier with Alfie about Southampton and obviously Loro's lead, a game that Ipswich probably need to win and turn the tide on if they're going to keep the pace at the top.
Yeah, and they've struggled, haven't they, since George Hurst, I guess their best striker, suffered a significant hamstring injury. So they've struggled to kind of replace him a little bit. What I will say is I was going to say, I didn't mention this in the last pod. I think I must have forgot about it. But watching Sunderland's against Newcastle, I was really interested to see how the likes of Joe Bellingham and Jack Clarke would get on against Premier League opposition. And they disappointed. Now, and I didn't think they would, to be honest. I thought that they would thrive. Now, they're both young, really young players, and obviously one game doesn't mean that you're a
high emotional game as well against Newcastle. If they were playing a Palace or a West Ham or something, there might have been less emotion in the game. They might have shone a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, when you lose 3-0 to your neighbours, the heavy legs can look a little bit heavier, etc. But it'd be interesting to see how they get on. Like you just said, Ipswich on a bad run of form. So Sunderland will go there thinking they can get a good result. And I think Ipswich have drawn the last 2 games 0-0. So they're struggling for goals. So, yeah, look, really interesting tie. If it wasn't for Newcastle Man City, I'd have loved to have watched that.
Laurie, that game, obviously, from a Leeds perspective, obviously looking for Ipswich to drop points, same as Saints fans. But a Sunderland a side that would worry you about automatic promotion, or do you think their aspirations would be to get a playoff place again?
The latter. I think Sunderland are a really good bet for a playoff place if Mick Bill can find his managerial prowess again. Because, again, I'm not convinced that's a great appointment still for Sunderland. I think they'd be far better off with Tony Mowbray, to be honest with you. But they've got some good players, and I'd like to see him in the playoffs. But we seem to be saying that about a lot of teams in the Championship. There's only 4 that can get in there. As far as Leeds are concerned, it's all about Leeds. Do you know what I mean? Ipswich, I've seen enough now to think that they probably will fall away a little bit. Southampton aren't going to go unbeaten for the rest of the season. Leeds just need to win their fucking games. And to be honest with you, they've been pretty good at home this season and struggled a lot away. And I'm looking at the odds for this weekend, and Cardiff are 4-1 at home to beat us. If I was a Bluebird, I'd be all over that because we don't seem to be able to score the goals. And teams have, I said that on the last pod, I think, worked out that if they sit in that kind of low block against Leeds, we struggle with that kind of chaotic free-flowing football that Daniel Farke tries to get his goals from. So hopefully we can engineer a way out of that and get 3 points. But that's a really tricky game for Leeds. So all about Leeds in terms of Leeds' trajectory this season. Need to start winning away from home. And if we do get that form right, I think we'll have that second automatic spot because Ipswich have shown enough now, like I said, to tell me that they're a very good side, but maybe we'll run out of a little bit of steam.
One other fixture, guys, just talk on Birmingham versus Swansea. Wouldn't normally talk about 20th place hosting 16th place, but Tony Mowbray versus Luke Williams, 2 manager changes that we've spoken about recently. Luke Williams got off to winning ways against Morecambe in the Cup. Obviously, the league a bit of a different beast. But you look down the Championship, I couldn't believe to see Blackburn down in 17th. I thought they were right up there, but I suppose they probably were because they're only 5 points off of 8th. So that's the nature of the Championship. But league debuts for both Mowbray and Williams at their clubs and both be looking to get off to winning starts. And then if you just want one other TV fixture, if you want some Friday night football, you've got Hull versus Norwich. If you don't want to watch Burnley versus Luton, Hull in 7th place can actually go up to 5th with a victory, and Norwich are on Go on, Tomo.
And on Hull, Fabio Carvalho's just joined on loan from Liverpool, which is obviously a really exciting prospect because he was probably one of the Championship's best players when he got promoted with Fulham. Since then, he's obviously not settled into Liverpool. Not a great loan spell at RB Leipzig at the first half of this season, but now he's at Hull, and they've got a really good young player who, every time I watch EFL highlights, that Jadon, it's hard to pronounce his second name, Philogene, he looks like an absolute baller. So I'm really excited to see Fabio Carvalho play alongside him, because I think, and obviously we spoke a lot about Rossinha and his coaching credentials, and he's doing a really good job. So exciting times for Hull.
I think you can draw a comparison with Fabio Carvalho with Jack Clarke. When Leeds under Bielsa in the first season, Jack Clarke had a brilliant season at like 18 years of age or whatever, maybe even younger. Tottenham signed him for about 10 million, didn't get in the side there, had a few unsuccessful loans, then had to find a home again in the Championship. Maybe that's the sort of thing that Carvalho needs to kickstart his career. And I'm really surprised that Hull have got him. I don't know if you saw the Hull announcement, but it was like a blind date thing, and it was like Leeds and maybe even Southampton lining up to get him. He could have walked into any of the teams other than Leicester, maybe in the Championship, you'd have thought. So a really good coup for Liam Rossinha and Hull City. And
He'll be
make them more dangerous.
Liam Rossinha will be the big reason, because he's a really impressive coach, plays on the front foot, plays attacking football, and I can't see any other reason why he would pick Hull, to be honest.
Yeah, well,
than him.
I mean, I can't imagine Fabio's been too disappointed speaking with Daniel Farke or Russell Martin, both probably good man managers and both got their ethoses. But Rossinha said something, right? Whether it's, well, I think we spoke off air, Laura, whether it's game time for Rossinha guaranteed at Hull, whereas is he going to get in over James, Somerville, Rutter, Pirot, Bamford now coming back into it at Leeds, and Southampton obviously strong going forward as well with Fraser Armstrong, etc. It might be that guaranteed game time that he's looking for that Hull have been able to offer him, but exciting signing for them.
It will definitely be the guaranteed game time, because I think, do you remember Jeff Stelling's ran on Gillette Soccer Saturday about I think Hull and Middlesbrough were voted the worst towns to live in the whole of the UK, and he started sticking up for the North. So it can't be Hull's sites and all of that stuff. Although I haven't been to Hull, so I don't know if it is a shithole.
I don't like the guaranteed game time one. That always worries me with the player. I think if you're Fabio Carvalho and you're good enough to go and play for Liverpool, it doesn't. If you're going to the Championship on loan, it shouldn't matter. You should be good enough to go and be good enough to play every week. So I'm not overly enthused on that one, and I always think that when I hear that about a player, or you sort of read between the lines and think that's why someone's gone somewhere. But nevertheless, we know he's a quality player. You're right. With Fulham in that Mitrovic season where he scored 45, he was probably the second standout player for them that year. And like we said, great coup for Rossinha and Hull.
Yeah, just a quick little bit of context before we move on. Obviously, this is coming off the back of a 6-month loan at RB Leipzig, Laura, where he's barely kicked a ball. So Liverpool are going to be basically saying you need to play, and obviously he wants to play as well. So that guaranteed game time. I know you are right in saying that you should be confident enough to go into Leeds or Southampton or any club in the Championship and get into the team, but obviously Liam Rosenior's just gone, look, you're going to be our main man straight away. Boom.
Fair point.
Jadon Philogene, who you have been impressed with, Tomo, he's actually been out as well for the last month as well, injured. So probably a much needed body for Hull. But if they can get him back and Carvalho playing together, then that will be very exciting. We'll just do a wrap up of the rest of the EFL action, boys. So Portsmouth versus Leyton Orient, first versus 12th, which on the face of it would look like a home banker, but Orient are actually in much better form than Portsmouth. Portsmouth have been struggling in recent week, and Leyton Orient have got 10 points from their last 5, so potentially a bit of a away upset there. Bolton versus Cheltenham, again, Bolton right up there, Cheltenham right down there, and Bolton have got 2 games in hand on Portsmouth and will go top if they win them. But Cheltenham won versus Portsmouth recently. Thomas spoke on the last pod about how well Darryl Clark's doing and said that's their biggest win of the season, home to Portsmouth. If they go and win away at Bolton, that'll be even bigger. And that is 2nd versus 4th in the form table as well. So should be a good game. And then 3rd place, Peterborough, they host Charlton, which is 3rd versus 13th. But Charlton have got Alfie May injured at the minute. So he's stuck on 15 goals and unable to help at the minute. So probably lead to a Peterborough victory there. Derby are playing Burton on Monday Night Football as well. Derby, obviously, they're now actually bookies' favourites to go up automatically ahead of Portsmouth, Bolton and Peterborough. They've got the shortest odds, which we spoke about on the last pod. Whether they'll go on and win the league, I don't know, but the bookies are having them to go up automatically now.
So they're favourites to win the league then?
I only checked on the odds for promotion. They've got the shortest odds, so I'd imagine that would mean
if they're top of that, they must be favourites to win the league.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously Paul.
The Paul Warne effect. I was going to say.
It is.
Paul Warne
effect.
The Paul Warne effect.
Paul Warne.
We're all right behind you.
This podcast is sponsored by Paul Warne.
Yeah, it is. To be fair, maybe we can get him on. He did that moment of truth, didn't he? So maybe we can get him on the old Pyramid Pod.
Oh, I'd love to get Paul Warne on the show. That'd be class. You used to speak
Russell
to him down at the Breck, didn't you, Murph?
Yeah, and I knew Warney a bit. I used to have a fiver on him to score first for Yeovil. I never did, but 12-1 was always enticing. Burton, who they're playing, have got a new manager in, Martin Patterson, who was at Swansea with Michael Duff as their assistant manager. Actually, I remember him from Footy Manager. Martin Patterson used to be about the EFL and be a forward to sign on there. But I've also noticed as well that United have had on the bench a young striker called Joe Hugo in recent weeks, who's not managed to come on. But apparently he's going on loan to Burton as well. So a new manager and a new striker in the door. So maybe not a home banker for Derby. And we got a friend of the pod, Big Zim, who's a Burton fan, who was really excited about Martin Patterson and Joe Hugo coming in. So yeah, good luck to those guys. Move on to League Two, boys. So Stockport versus Walsall, 1st versus 13th. Obviously, Southampton beat Walsall 4-0 in the FA Cup, which is obviously levels to this. But Walsall are actually top of the form chart in League Two. And Stockport haven't won in 3 now. So again, what potentially was looking like a home banker on paper might not be that. 17th place Morecambe. They host 2nd place Mansfield. Mansfield lost their last game at home to Crewe while everyone else was playing in the FA Cup. They missed the chance to go top there. But I think Mansfield are now bookies' favourites to win League Two. 3rd place Wrexham hosts 7th place Wimbledon. It was 1-1 in the reverse fixture towards the start of the season. I don't know if Wimbledon have still got their striker at the minute. I think it's Al Hamadi, who's been linked with a January move. But if he's still there, obviously they've always got a chance. Wrexham a good going forward, but concede at the back. So would tip him to have a say in the game if he is still there. And 4th place Barrow hosts 24th place Sutton, so that does look like a home banker. And Barrow are now actually only 3 points off the top. I saw their manager doing, all managers seem to do this at the minute, that kind of 3 fist pump to the stand after you've won a game. But is it Pete Wild, Loro, I saw for Barrow doing that?
Yeah, Pete Wild. I'm surprised he's still at Barrow, to be honest with you. When you see a team like that, 4th in League Two, I mean, I don't know if you've seen Barrow's ground, but it leaves a lot to be desired. And they're obviously a very small football club up in a very sort of ostracised part of the country. Unbelievable. But it seems to be at the moment, like we've just seen it with like Burton as well and Plymouth. it's trendy to like sign a coach out of like someone's backroom staff at the moment. That seems to be all the rage, and like that everyone's hoping to get the next Kieran McKenna. So it's almost like if you lose your job, go and be someone's assistant and look like you're doing something in the coaching, and then maybe you get plucked. But brilliant for Barrow. But I've got a question on League Two for you both. Speaking midweek, obviously Luke Williams has departed Notts County to go to Swansea, and we were talking about, me and a friend, we were talking about Macaulay Langstaff, who's now the top scorer in League Two. Last season, he broke the National League all-time scorer record in the National League. He scored over 100 goals in the last 4 seasons, right? And an untrodden path, or a rarely trodden path. We've seen Jamie Vardy come out of non-league and get to Premier League in England and stuff like that. Luke Williams has sort of been asked about taking Langstaff to Swansea in the Championship. If Langstaff was signed from Notts County tomorrow, how much money is he worth? About to turn 27.
Well, it's difficult to say because, like you just said, he's 26, just about to turn 27. He's unproven at that level. And I'm not sure how long he's got left on his contract. But say if he's got 3 years left on his contract, you've got to look at a couple million, have you? Maybe? 1 million? 2 million?
I draw the comparison to Vardy because he didn't get to the Premier League until he was about 27, 28. I think he got 100 Premier League goals after the age of 30. And that was a player that relied on his speed a lot as well. So there is longevity in players like this, especially who have had to come up through the leagues and do it the hard way. And he's not particularly old, about to turn 27. 100 goals in the last 4 seasons. Surely someone's going to take a punt on him soon. He knows where the back of the net is, and I think that could be. I couldn't picture whether it's 500,000 or is it 5 million.
How much did I know Paul Mullin went on a free transfer from Cambridge? How much did Ollie Palmer cost at Wimbledon? He was banging in goals. I want to say that was £1 million that Wrexham had to pay for him, and Wrexham might have a tax on him. But Macaulay Langstaff's younger than that. He's probably scored more goals than what Ollie Palmer has, especially consistently over a couple of years. And it's going to the Championship. Vardy was, I think, $1 million, wasn't he, to Leicester? But that was a fair few number of years ago now. And for Notts County, if Notts County got aspirations to go back up, it's also who do you then go and replace him with? So if he's tied to a long-term contract, Notts County could just name a figure. They might go, right, you can have him, but it's going to cost you 5 mil or 7.5 mil. It's like, how badly do you want Macaulay Langstaff then?
Yeah,
and Swansea might say, no, we're not paying that. But Notts County would be like, well, fine, we keep our record goal scorer and the guy who could potentially fire us up to League One. So
I know you boys know me and I love my documentaries, and I just watched the first episode of Salford's documentary, and in that you have a sit down meeting with Nicky Butt, the chief scout, Paul Scholes and Ryan Giggs, and it's in a January transfer window, and they're talking about strikers, and basically they make it clear that at that level you've got about 15 or 20 clubs in each league wanting a striker in January, because if you're struggling, you need a striker to keep you safe. And if you're pushing for the promotion, you need a striker to get you over the line. So it's always a striker that clubs need. So Notts County will also have that premium when it comes to Macaulay Langstaff. Look, I can't see Swansea affording 7.5 million, but a couple of million, that seems more realistic.
Tell you what would be interesting is if Wrexham got hold of what that fee was, if Swansea were trying to do a deal. Obviously, they've got the financial prowess that they've got. They watched Langstaff nearly outscored Mullin last season and doing it again this season. Whether they then go, right, well, we'll pay that, we'll guarantee to go up then. They've got Steve Fletcher and
they've got Fletcher, Palmer.
But they just start to offload those guys. Paul Mullin can't be getting any younger. I imagine he's older than Macaulay
he's just signed a new contract.
Yeah, but I'm just saying Wrexham might be like, well, we'll certainly have Langstaff if he's going. But no, interesting point, Laurie. What do you think that he will move? Do you think that there'll be reasonable grounds for someone to take him on in January and pay the money that Notts want for him?
I definitely think there's reasonable grounds to take him on because he's proven it consistently now. And sometimes you can beat teams, you can be guilty of thinking, oh, he's nearly 27, he's nearly done. He ain't nearly done. Do you know what I mean? And Langstaff ain't a player that relies on his pace necessarily. He's probably got like 8 years left of bagging goals. So I think a Championship club will take him, but maybe in the summer. And like Tigo said, I'm not sure what's left on his deal. But I think Luke Williams has come out and said, look, I want to see Notts County go up and Langstaff needs to be there.
I don't like
but it's
that.
It's not just up to him, is it? It might be another
No.
Championship. I just think if you're in the Championship, you don't have, enough money to go and get Ellis Sims from the Premier League or whatever. Surely you're looking at the top scorers in League 1 and 2 and thinking, can we find a gem?
Well, I'm just thinking, I wish
how much the cost.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I wish Eric Ten Hag said that about Anthony, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. We must leave Anthony at Ajax. I don't like that from Luke Williams though. If sentimental value of your time at Notts County aside, you're now a Swansea manager, and in where goal scorers are rare breeds now, if Macaulay Langstaff's available and he thinks that he can play at that level, I said earlier, Swansea are in like 16th place, but they're not that far off the playoffs. Who's to say that he couldn't come in and bang the 10 to 15 goals that Joel Piro's not getting for them now and fire them up to the table? So, yeah, be interesting to see that one.
Another quick point on Macaulay Langstaff. The season before last, he was actually in the National League North with Gateshead. And then Notts County took him. And then obviously, so he's done loads in National League North, broke the record in the National League Premier. And now he's the top scorer in League 2. So he can make jumps up. I know it's another couple of levels again, but sometimes goal scorers are goal scorers, aren't they? We've said that about you in the past, Murph. I know you're nearly 32 now, but at one point we were sort of saying we'd take you up front for Yeovil, weren't we? So I think he'd be putting my cards on the table. I think if a Championship club did take him, it'd be a good signing.
Yeah, and that was no view of my own. I would be nowhere near it at that level, just to specify. The one thing I would say is that people say strikers peaks 28 to 32. So if he's 27th in striker terms, he's still not gone into his peak. If he's done National League North, he's done National League, and he's now tearing up League 2. Could you look at someone at the top of League 1 who's wanting to pull away from the pack? A Portsmouth, a Derby, a Peterborough, who normally quite astute with their signings, to bring him in for a couple mil or 1-2 mil if he was available for that, and maybe see if he can do it at League 1 then. And then if they get promoted, suddenly he's at the Championship. So probably different avenues available to him. But at the same time, he might fancy staying at Notts County, scoring 35 goals again and getting them up to League 1 and then taking on League 1 with them. So probably not a bad position to be in if you're Macaulay Langstaff at the minute. Move on to Yeovil, Lauro. So we spoke about the Derby, well, lots of games of Derbies now. Derby win against Bath, and we previewed the game against Taunton midweek, a pitch that struggles sometimes with weather, and it's been Baltically cold at the minute, but managed to get the game on, and Yeovil went on and picked up another 3 points.
They did. Before I talk about the game, I'll just say, look, I like Taunton as a place. Wonderful town to go and watch cricket in. Somerset, winners of the Big Bash last year, Blackburn Al Abbey and all that sort of stuff. But to watch football there, it is diabolical. Their stadium is the worst one I've been to this season. And I've been to nearly every single National League South away game. And there's been some bad ones. Horrible place to go, particularly when it was -5. I had 3 pasties, right? Because it was so cold. At one point, I wanted to buy a couple of sausage rolls to put them in my shoes. And I know it's not their fault that it was so cold, but I mean, another thing that annoyed me, the home end had like this massive burger village behind it where you could go to like 9 or 10 different like eateries and choose what you were having. The away end had the pasty boys who were serving undercooked pastry goods, which I mean, admittedly I ate 3 of, but let's not be aside. The game was poor. I mean, Yeovil seem to be a different side away from home, but they do still salvage the results normally. Taunton, a club going in the wrong direction at the moment, unfortunately, financially. They're losing players left, right and centre. They brought a couple of young loanees in, including Zach Bell, actually, from Bristol City, who started the season at Yeovil, but wasn't good enough. And they made it difficult for us. But Frank Newball popped up 4-4, wonderful through ball from Matthew Worthington, and that was enough for us to win the game. And we were never, ever troubled. Joe Day didn't have to make a save hardly at the other end. So really good 3 points. Horrible evening watching football in the bitter cold at the worst stadium I've ever been to. But on we march, 13 points clear. We're not playing this weekend, got a little break. So I've seen on Instagram a lot of the players are off on holiday. I think Jake Winnell's in Marrakesh and One of the other players is over in Scandinavia or something. So probably a well-earned break, and then hopefully they can hit the ground running for Hemel Hempstead next Saturday, which is a reverse fixture of the opening day of the season where we actually lost up at their place. So, yeah, again, we march on and hopefully we'll have the league sewn up soon.
Up the Glovers. Right, boys, we'll finish with the Pyramid Pod treble. New year, new us. This is going to be the year of winners. I'm going to kick us off here, boys, actually, because I've seen a bit of value that I really like, and you might shoot me down there, but Millwall play Middlesbrough. And Millwall are 2-1 at home against Middlesbrough, who are injury ravished. They've got the Carabao Cup semi-final on their minds. Lost a couple more players of injuries. They're going to be leggy from midweek as hell. And I think Millwall 2-1 at home is astonishingly good odds. And they've won their last 3 league games as well. So yes, they sit 15th, but they're flying. Middlesbrough are injury ravished and they're leggy from midweek. So I think that's the biggest banker of the weekend.
Yeah, and that's thrown me off.
So did you?
Yeah, that's thrown me off a little bit because I went Millwall for all the same reasons you did. But I'm going to go for Birmingham. They play Swansea at home, and I just think the new manager bounce. I know Swansea have got a new manager as well, but with Birmingham being at home, I think they'll beat Swansea, and it's 5-4.
I'm going to go Cambridge. They're at home to Fleetwood. I don't know what Fleetwood are doing this season, but they're already on their 3rd manager, and that 3rd manager is Charlie Adam, who, how can I put this? I think is flattered to deceive in a lot of the footballing things that he's done since leaving Blackpool, the Liverpool transfer and everything else ever since. So I'm not sure how that's going to go down, and I'm certainly not sure he's the right man to lead a team off the foot of the table with half a season left to go. So I think it's going to be a really tricky task for them going to Cambridge and getting anything. I fancy a 3-0 win there. So over evens, 23-20. I think they're a good price.
Good stuff. So just to confirm, guys, that's Birmingham to beat Swansea at home, Millwall to beat Middlesbrough at home, and Cambridge to beat Fleetwood at home. So on Sky Bet, that's 13.5 to 1. So £10 stake returns £145. Obviously, other bookmakers available might get better odds elsewhere, but that's our bookies of choice. Yeah, let's get the new year off to a flying start with the treble, start earning back some of those losses and start to get into the profit. But boys, pleasure as always. We'll be back on Monday where we'll review all of that weekend action and celebrate the first winning Pyramid Pod treble. Cheers, boys.
Thank you.